Metroid was a big hit when it released, selling over 2.7 million copies worldwide, so it was natural that a sequel should be in the works. So in 1991, 4 years after the original Metroid, we got Metroid 2: Return of Samus on the Game Boy. Okay, that's kind of odd considering the Super Nintendo was already out for a year at this point. Why couldn't the game be developed for the more powerful system? Now don't get me wrong, I loved playing on my Game Boy Color as a kid, but there are some games that I feel are best on a home console. A Metroidvania on a Game Boy sounds limiting, for a lack of better words. But let's see if the game works well on a handheld before really ruling it out. After the Space Pirate attack, the Galactic Federation orders Samus to eliminate the Metroid threat, before the Space Pirates have another opportunity to use them as weapons. And by eliminate, they do want the entire race extinct. Which, I mean, it shouldn't be all too bad. I doubt it'd have any effect on the ecosystem in any way, shape, or form. But Samus, without a second thought, flies over to SR-388 and take out the race of dying fanged jellyfish. The real enemy in this game is the Metroids, which is what you'll be fighting for most of your adventure. You do have one original boss in the form of Arachnus, though he kinda looks like a Metroid, but he isn't a Metroid. Going to assume he's a biological cousin of the Metroid race that like to eat their cousins being on the top of the food chain. I don't know, that's what I got out of this. But yeah, when it comes to the bosses, you're mostly fighting Metroids, 39 to be exact. And while that sounds like a lot, you will be fighting the same boss several times, since there are only 4 types of Metroids, plus the Queen as the final boss. Also, the most you'll find are Alphas and Omegas, 15 and 16 respectively, so you're not getting a lot of variety here. Or difficulty for that matter. Both of them go down very easily with only a few missiles to face or stomach. Even easier when you find some cover to exploit the terrain. The game can be very easy in that regard, and it's kind of odd when... I'll get to that later actually. But that doesn't mean the whole game is a piece of cake, because the Zeta are going to not only eat that cake, but throw it into your face. Like the analogy, these things are disgusting. They're fast, they hit hard, and they take so much punishment. You'd think the older phases in the form of Omega Metroids would be harder since they take a lot more damage. But at least at that point you have the screw attack so you can push them away and piss off, bitch! You don't have the screw attack when you fight 8 of the Zetas, so it's kind of a pain in the ass. Luckily there's only 3, so it's not as bad as I wanted to make it. When you get to the last area where the Queen is located, suddenly 8 more bastards come to play, and holy shit, these are the freaking infants! Get off me, get off me, get off me! Actually, okay, the first one was kind of a bitch, but the rest are really easy to kill if you take advantage of the terrain. I mean, they are toddlers, I suppose. But holy shit, the Queen Metroid is the easiest bullshit final boss I've ever fought. For the most part, she kind of lunges at you, but you can stun her when you shoot missiles into her open mouth, and crawl into her stomach to bomb her insides while taking damage. Yeah, like I said, the fight is practically easy if you find the shortcuts, but the shortcuts are still straight up bullshit. But after that, you find the baby, and you just have it follow you to your ship. Yeah, your job is to kill these things, and how I see it, Sam is just like, oh my gosh, it's so adorable! I'm gonna keep you and love you, and we'll go to Disneyland together! Oh, come on, little Sam, we're going home. I'll talk about the rest of the gameplay in a little bit, but I want to get the presentation out of the way. Oh, all this was tough to play through. Not only is the grayish green screen an eyesore to look at, seeing the 3DS Virtual Console doesn't allow Game Boy Color or Super Game Boy palettes, but the music... oh, hell, the music makes my ears suffer. The Game Boy cannot do ambience, and they try. They seriously do try, but damn, it burns my ears with the screeching beeps and whistles. Ugh, it's not pleasant to hear. However, the sound design is okay, but hearing the Metroid squeal twice every second will make you want to flamethrower your own freaking Game Boy. Other than that, the enemies' designs are passable. Samus looks a lot better than her big head design in the original game. And for the system to achieve it, the landscapes do look varied. You can kinda tell the difference between water and acid, or grass and gravel. It's not much, but for the Game Boy to do this, it's kinda cool. Even if the grass hurts you on contact. At least you can hurt it back for revenge. With that said, let's talk about the control, as it's both an upgrade from the original game, but there are a lot of things in this game that kinda balance the positives. First off, Samus' mobility has improved dramatically. You can shoot downwards in the air, you can crouch to attack smaller enemies, which would have been amazing for the last game, and you get new abilities in the form of the Spring Ball, so you can jump as the Morph Ball, new beams like the Wave, Spacer, and Plasma Beams, as well as the awesome new additions of the Space Jump and Spider Ball, making navigations much more enjoyable. All of this is really good. With this much variety, this game has to be a much tighter experience. Not entirely. Let's start with the Spider Ball. The Spider Ball made navigating smaller areas a little more comfy, but that's thrown out the window when you have to hit down on the D-pad 3 times. Once to crouch, then to get into the Morph Ball, and then to activate Spider Ball. It gets very tedious when you have to press down more times than necessary. Plus, getting hit or having one of your bombs hit you deactivates Spider Ball, and that gets more annoying when you have to reactivate in the air or have to get back up to the place you need to be. And then there's the new beams. Sure, it's cool to have the return of the Ice Beam, which doesn't have the freeze-unfreeze thing like last time. The Wave Beam going through hazards and walls is handy. The Plasma Beam increasing your power is also appreciated. And the Spacer Beam shooting 3 beams at once is great for increasing accuracy. But the thing is, you don't keep all of them when you grab a beam. And you have to go to a Chozo statue that contains the beam you want. But really, all you need is the Spacer Beam and Wave Beam. They'll trick you along fine. The Ice Beam doesn't do much when you freeze enemies, and yeah, it hurts Metroids, but missiles do a way better job. And the Plasma Beam is a more powerful beam, but that's it really. I wish you kept all the beams and toggled them with a select, like you did with missiles. Sure, it'd be tedious, but it'd be better than backtracking for the damn things, and maybe they could have stacked all the beams together and had the added benefits, like you're getting a better beam throughout the game. And then we have the Space Jump. Infinite jumps if you get the timing just right, if the game wants you to do it anyway. I feel like the Space Beam doesn't work a lot of the time. It's like a 50-50 chance on whether or not you can do it right in the first place. Though when the power-ups do well, they can be fun to use. Using the Space Jump and Spider Ball, like I said earlier, makes exploration a lot more fun. And the new beams, while not convenient, die by my own illogical multi-beam eradication, you squishy bastards! And finishing it off is the level design. For the most part, it's pretty good. Not amazing, not even all that memorable, but it works fine. But then there are times when the level design gets dull and empty. This is where the Space Jump and Spider Ball shine the most. It can also get confusing. For example, there are times when any health and ammo charge station is located in a boss room. I agree, it makes a lot of sense. Seriously though, this was a dick move. Ow. In closing, Return to Samus, in several ways, is a great follow-up from the NES original. But it's also a step back in the same fields, canceling out as good as the last game, but not enough to check out. That would be the end of this, but in September of last year, we got a remake of the game by Mercury Steam, the people who made the Castlevania Lord of Shadow games, which I know next to nothing about outside of Mirror of Fate, I believe, and I wasn't really a fan of. The remake was going to be on the 3DS, titled Metroid Samus Returns. Even though the Switch would have been a good console for it as well. That complaint sounds familiar, huh? At least the 3DS and Switch don't have that big of a power grab compared to the Game Boy and SNES, but I think having it on the hybrid console would have been a smart option. But man, that announcement from E3 2017 was ridiculous. Seeing the Metroid Prime 4 logo may have made my voice box burst into pieces, but seeing the gameplay of Samus Returns somehow restored my voice box to its original state. Keep in mind that we have been starving for a new Metroid game for years. Depending on who you ask, it may have been 7 years, 10 years, or 13 years, whatever they define as a true Metroid game. Federation Force doesn't count for anyone. For me, it hasn't been that bad of a wait, considering I technically discovered the series in 2013, but I did want a new game for a long time, considering the last game was... we'll get to it. And seeing that Samus Returns would be out in 3 months, I was a little ecstatic. Got the game at launch, and it's possibly my favorite game of 2017. Yes, in a year where Super Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, Persona 5, Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, and Sonic Frickin' Mania came out to blow our minds, this would have to be my number one. And the reason for that was not only was it a great game, but it was the timing, the structure compared to the other games, and the pure replayability I've always appreciated in video games. Most of the games I listed I'll talk about later down the road, but I just resonated with this game more than the other games at that time. But let's get away with my reminiscing and start this up. The story is the same thing, it is a remake after all, but the new cutscenes make the story a bit more intriguing. Being flying stalactite bats to a pulp, having Samus' face shat on by this iron giant, and the scene of the baby is made a lot more powerful. Samus seeing the hatchling as a docile, defenseless orphan, she lets it live because she herself was in the same situation. With Ridley killing her parents, similar to how she was killing off the Metroid race. She was the monster in that situation, whether she liked it or not. And she wanted to make it up to the baby by sparing it and have it safe with the Federation. I think the last part is true, but I never knew how symbolic this was, and I really love how much more emotion this game gave, with no dialogue. It's really something. The story may be the same for the most part, I'll get to the rest eventually. The presentation and gameplay make it feel like a completely new game entirely. If they just replaced the Metroids with new bosses, this would basically be Metroid 5. But this is essentially a Metroid 2 remake, so Metroids are still the big focus. But to give honest to god credit, the bosses are a lot more energetic, and frankly a lot more fun, unless the Gammas crawl into these gooey spider nests. Just gross. And you have to go to another room to actually find them and beat them, and it gets annoying, especially when they do that multiple times. Damn, I hate the Gammas in this game. At least the Zeta and Omegas don't fly at you like a rocket, and I will be forever grateful for that. Arachnus has some changes in his fight, which are pretty good, but there are a couple of new faces to fight. First off, you meet the Diggernaut twice in the game. Once for a chase, and at the second to last area as a boss fight, and holy shit, this battle was a little hard to figure out, but it was a fun fight regardless. The other fight, small spoilers if you haven't played the game yet, skip here if you want to avoid it, is a fight with Ridley, with the final form of his meta armor for Metroid Prime, as I'll get to the Prime games another time, and he ambushes Samus in order to stop her Metroid genocide. With his late arrival, he takes the baby and fights Samus off. The fight is fun with some nice storytelling elements, but it takes a little too long. After that, Fusion sequel beats! But we'll talk about that when we get to Fusion. Story and bosses are great, but the big changes were with the looks, sound, and gameplay. I can't say much about the presentation, the game looks absolutely phenomenal on the 3DS. Hell, I'd say it looks great, period. And the game has the original soundtrack heavily remixed, and I love it so much. The sound design is also really good. Every explosion, impact, and enemy cry is satisfying, as well as the sound you make when you smack enemies with the new melee counter. Yay, a decent segue. The changes to the gameplay are so big, to repeat myself, it makes the game so different it may as well be a brand new adventure. First off, the melee counter. The first time Samus receives a physical form of damage. Use the X button before the enemy takes you out, not only to stun the enemy, but also get an opportunity to shoot the enemy with one quick bullet shot. Beam bullets are a thing, right? Who cares? It is a little sluggish though, since you have to stop in order to use it, so it's not all that practical. In addition to the counter, you also have the ability to fire at 360 degrees while standing still. While the downside is you have to stay still while using it, it was definitely the new ability I used the most. Trading in mobility for accuracy is something I'll take any day, especially when there are times that mobility isn't needed, like going for upgrades for example. For the last of the new abilities, you have the Aeon abilities. Not one, not two, but 4 abilities that you can use with the new Aeon meter. You have the Scan Pulse, revealing parts of the map you haven't explored yet, a great tool for completionists, and it also reveals breakable blocks if you ever get stuck at any point. Lightning Armor is basically a shield, and it's necessary for these weeds and this poison gas that spews from this wasp hive. I never got this. The Beam Burst turns your arm cannon into a machine gun that is a must for certain enemies and obstacles, and the Phase Drift slows down time around you. It all sounds cool, but like the beams in Metroid 2, I only found worth in half of these abilities. The Scan Pulse for obvious reasons, and the Lightning Armor is great for reckless players like myself. The other 2 abilities are so situational that I only used the Beam Burst for enemies that can only be killed by it, and the Phase Drift was only used for upgrades. That's it. The Aeon abilities are cool on paper, but they weren't too useful in the grand scheme of things. But they can also be seen as optional tools, just in case you wanted to use them. But it's not just the new abilities that make the game a little more interesting. The abilities from the original game are a lot more streamlined. For example, the Spider Ball is activated with the L button, not by hitting the D-pad, so that makes it a lot more convenient. And the Space Jump is a lot easier to use, though that was more streamlined when Super Metroid made its rounds. Though I will say, even with all these new toys at your disposal, the game is still pretty challenging. I dare say it's one of the hardest games in the series yet. It's totally fair, however, unlike the original Metroid 2, which just throws shit at you at times, Samus Returns is consistently fun and challenging. Though it's kind of weird how the remake of Metroid 2 is a lot more challenging than the original Metroid 2, which was somewhat easy for 90% of the adventure. Level design is also revamped for Samus Returns, to accommodate for the new moveset Samus is packing. It's always great to see the grapple beam, which is also used as a lasso, which is interesting. You got super missiles and power bombs for ultimate damage and destruction too, though you usually use them to find upgrades for the most part. You can also do this with the Spider Ball and power bombs. Admit it, that's actually kinda cool. With that, Samus Returns is a great game. Not only as a remake or a standalone, but damn it's great to see a new Metroid game come out after so long. And we got at least one more game coming out in the form of Metroid Prime 4. I am so excited. If you haven't tried it out, I highly recommend giving this game a shot. I'd say Zero Mission is the best starting point if you ever want to get into the series. but it's not a bad way to start if you pick this game as your first. In addition, the teases this game throws at us at the end, as well as the gallery, it shows that Mercury Steam is interested in furthering the story after Metroid Fusion. If it takes inspiration from this game, I have no problems having Mercury Steam back for the brand new adventure. Though from what I've seen, the sales for Samus Returns was not very good, selling less than 500,000 copies. That could just be the physical sales, but I doubt the digital sales were any better. I just hope Nintendo doesn't write this off as a failure so we can avoid another series drought.
Well, we'll see how the future of the Metroid series holds out in due time. But right now, next time, we're going to be looking at what many people classify as the best in the series, Super Metroid, on the Super Nintendo. Until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll play with you guys next time.